welcome. I'm Rachel,
I'm Amanda.
and this is episode 30 of Books and Bingos. This week we're discussing spooky books with returning guest host Deb Zeman, aka Zebrarian, and new special guest Rachel Welsh, aka Rachel Reads. Rachel, welcome. This is your first time. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thank you so much. Long time listener, first time guest. My name is Rachel Welsh. I am also a librarian, a school librarian. I'm at South Texas, so I'm on the Gulf Coast of Texas in Hurricane Alley. I'm a middle school librarian, but I've also been at a high school and an elementary school. So I like to joke with the kids that I'm collecting the school levels like Thanos with the Infinity Stones. So yeah, I'm super excited to be here talking about my favorite type of books, which are the spooky stories.
And this is the perfect episode because you have a spooky podcast yourself with a previous host, Karina, correct?
Yes, Karina or Q the librarian. She and I are the hosts of Shelf 133 because 133 is the Dewey Decimal for, ghost stories, supernatural. So we recover the spooky stories and books and movies and TV shows of our childhoods because we both are lifelong spooky lovers. So we started by talking about all of the old books that we used to, all the Goosebumps and the Fear Streets and, the Mary Downing Hahn that are just so pivotal in our, makeup as adults and as librarians. And we wanted to share those recollections and how they tie into, books and movies and TV today. So we have a lot of fun.
Mary Downing Hahn is still like she's on my shelf.
She is the goat. Yeah, my kids cannot get enough. And
Yeah.
she's still publishing. Like, God bless.
Yes.
She is, has a huge collection of works.
And I feel
So
like the Goosebumps fared a little better than the Fear Street collection in the long run. Like we all love the Fear Street, but
yeah,
my kids aren't checking those out now, but they still love Goosebumps.
I feel like Goosebumps kind of stands the test of time, but Fear Street is very dated. And I don't know if it's a teen thing, like the technology, but also the slang. And I reread one for our summer camp podcast. And the whole time I was just like, oh my God, because like there's so many gender stereotypes
Yes.
and
Yeah.
like because it was a different time. It was the early 90s.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, the Fear Street, although I will say I did have a lot of interest with the Netflix show. And I know
Yeah.
they're making another episode and I cannot wait. So the Netflix show kind of revitalized that. But
Yes.
when they checked them out, I was like, so this has actually nothing to do with the show. Like it's just the name. But it was like, here's how it ties in. And I kind of told them the Fear Street lore and they were very bored. But I thought it was fun.
Yes, I did too. I think all of us really enjoyed that movie coming out and just kind of bringing all that nostalgia back.
And yeah, that was such a well done series. I can't wait for the next one. It's supposed to be, I think it's the cheerleaders.
Oh.
Yeah, the first. Ooh, yeah, yeah.
Very
Mhm.
fun. All
Mhm.
right, we'll have to keep an eye out for that one. All right, let's jump into our spooky books. So, Amanda, go ahead and start us off with your first spooky book.
So my first pick is The Blonde Dies First by Joelle Wellington. If you haven't seen this cover, like that's what got me like right away. It looks so exactly what we're talking about with this episode. Very spooky, very scary, very horror themed. This is a young adult supernatural horror from the author of Their Vicious Games. So if you've read that title, and then I think there's going to be a follow-up to that one as well. That one falls more on like the fantasy side or type of thing. So this one was, I thought, an interesting turn for her. The way I described it was like Scream meets Slender Man. And it's like, and I didn't know it was supernatural when I started reading it. I just went off the cover and barely read the back. And so when things started happening that were unexplainable, I was like, oh, see, I like more of the horror, like that things could really happen, right? Like Scream, where there's like a serial killer or someone stalking them. Like that's my jam. And so with Supernatural, I'm always like, but this one actually was it felt a little even more magical realism. Like it could, like most of it was realistic, except there were a few things here and there that just couldn't be explained. And so this follows Devin, who feels like left behind by her genius twin sister, who just graduated from the private school that she attends separately from Devin. She graduated like a whole year early, and Drew was headed off to college. So Devin feels like she's being left behind and creates this best summer ever list for things to do with them together and their friends. First up includes attending a graduation party that Drew's boyfriend throws for her, and they decide to break out the Ouija board. Always a good idea, right? Um, Now the friend group is being stalked by a demon who collects trophies from his victims. And Yaya, who is Devin's best friend and longtime crush, is the final girl who must kill the demon to end the cycle. Because, kind of like Final Destination, they are getting knocked off one at a time. And so I felt like even though this wasn't my, like superhero or supernatural horror isn't really my thing, I felt like it was like the dynamics between the friends and the two sisters was great to read about, as well as the romance between Devin and Yaya. And so I just really got into their story, and then I felt like the horror part was secondary. Definitely very scary. So those of you that are looking forward to be, terrified by things, this will be definitely have that. But I loved the deeper side of it as well, following between all of the things that are happening in this friend group. Content warnings would be murder, gentrification, classism, violence, blood, hospitalization, broken bone, adult minor relationship, child death, car accident, death of a parent, racism, stalking, sexism, sexual harassment, death, and body horror. And I do want to say that there probably are going to be a lot of content warnings when you're reading a young adult or an adult horror book, right? They bring out all the things for these types of books. So just go into it with your eyes wide open and knowing exactly what you can handle. The bingo squares would be a 2024 release, spooky, thriller, YA, and then it does have that romance between the two girls. Just a good one for the Halloween spooky holiday time.
Awesome. See, I think I like the supernatural because I'm like, if they just show you like some random dude's face is like the killer, I'm like, well, that's, Bob. I'm not scared of him. But like, if they like never show you who it is, I feel like I'm always like, oh my gosh, yeah. So I think it just depends on how well it is,
Oh,
how well it's done,
for sure.
right? All right, Deb, you're next. Tell us about your first spooky pick.
Okay, mine is a middle grade. It's by a friend of ours, Adriana Cuevas, and it is The No-Brainer's Guide to Decomposition. She had me at zombies. I will just say that right now. I will read anything and everything horror zombie. But this one was a bit of a twist. And I remember her telling us she got the idea because she drove by a body farm near where she lives. And it's part of, is it Texas State, I believe?
Yes.
Yeah, where there's a body farm, and it's like, okay, what is a body farm? And she did some research, so she decided to do a middle grade book about this. And I have to say, this is the first or maybe second zombie book I've actually cried at the end because it was just so, it was so good. So what it is Franny is our main character. She struggles to focus at home and school to due to Aranita, an imaginary spider in her brain, which also isolates her socially, which we find out it's really her ADHD. And she's embarrassed to tell anybody about it. Dad is so focused on the body farm, she doesn't get the help she needs. So she finds solace working with her dad as a professor at Texas University, who researches cadaver decomposition at a body farm. And this is where Franny really gets her focus in. This is where you don't even realize she doesn't even see that she has the ADHD. So the story begins when a new researcher and his son Benji join the team. Benji quickly befriends Franny, and together they discover a reanimated teen body named Santiago. And it's not your usual like jump scare, gross out zombie. He's just a kid who wakes up and he doesn't understand what is happening? Why am I a zombie. So together, the three of them set out to investigate why other dead bodies are coming back to life. The book gross out factor with the scenes of decomposition bodies and falling limbs will definitely appeal to middle graders and, of course, an adult like myself who enjoy creepy stories without the fear element. Franny's father has over 200 corpses buried at their home for research studying this decomposition. And it's interesting because it shows you the deep dive that Adranna went into, because it's all about different dirt, different clothing, what happens when the body does decompose. Franny's mental distraction due to the spider in her head makes focusing and completing tasks difficult. She has an older sister who constantly badgers her about her lack of focus and that it brings down her self-esteem. And that's a struggle with many middle graders who have older siblings. They will understand why are you picking on me? I'm not you. I don't want to go any further because I'm going to end up spoiling it, but it was just a wonderful story. I totally forgot about the content warning. So we got zombies, disgusting grossness of things falling apart, to self-esteem. I'm trying to think what else. Zombies, zombies and more zombies. So that was my first book.
That sounds very interesting. And like you said, I think the kids will love like zombie body parts, all the gross stuff. They just eat that up.
Oh, yeah. But again, it's interesting, the whole science behind it too, where it's like, hi, look, if you really like being around dead people, you're an introvert, this is a perfect job for you, because that's how Franny comes off too, is as an introvert because of her disability that's not truly been diagnosed yet, because dad is so involved in everything else. So,
and that one releases September 24th. It is such a good book. Rachel, she and I both did cry at the end. So so Rachel Fryman hates a book that makes you cry. So I don't know if
I have to look into this one. That sounds great.
I'll just stop like at the 75% mark.
There you go.
No, you got to keep going.
I saw that, so she's actually coming to Tweens Read, the book festival in Houston. And I'm taking some of my students, so I'm definitely going to have to grab that one for her. Yeah.
It was
That'll be fun.
Yeah.
All right, Rachel, you're up next. Tell us about your first pick.
So my first pick is a YA horror novel. Well, I'm actually cheating because it's an anthology. So it is The White Guy Dies First, which is edited by Terry J. Benton-Walker, who is a fantastic author of his own right. And so these are 13 tales from horror writers and authors of color. And it has pretty much, content warning, pretty much everything that Amanda talked about, everything that you could possibly imagine, because it's different, 13 different authors with 13 different stories all over the African-American diaspora. There's Alexis Henderson, Tiffany D. Jackson, Lamar Giles, Kendare Blake, Kaylin Bayron, all of these authors, Chloe Gong, that all contributed to these stories. And, there's clowns, there's a hedge maze that's, maybe eating people, who knows? There's a bunch of rich kids that are bored and go on, like a wilding spree. It's very similar to another YA horror anthology that I absolutely love, that is The Black Girl Survives in This One, which is by Desiree S. Evans and Ceresia J. Fennell. They were on a TLA author panel that I moderated, and their stories are just as amazing. But these are all female presenting authors of color, again, with, just the most horrific stories that you can think of, that will, each one is different. They're all from different types of horror, because then you get to explore, there's the body horror, there's the supernatural, there's science fiction, there's all sorts of different types that you kind of forget, like, oh, it's not just slashers, it's not just, vampires and ghosts. Like, there's all sorts of different, there's social social horror. So both of those, I cheated, I did too. So both of those are just fantastic horror anthologies for the spooky season because there's something for everyone. It's like a trick or treat bag of scary stories by just amazing authors and editors.
Anthologies are perfect for that. I love recommending those to students, especially ones who are kind of
Me
struggling
too.
to find what they like to read, because they do. I think they can tell you which story they like the most, even if they can't pinpoint what it is. They can tell you, and then you can be like, "Well, this is what you're looking for," you know?
I like it for the reluctant readers also because I'm like
Yes.
it's not a commitment, it's just little stories you can stop, if you don't have the stamina to get through an entire 250 300-page novel, here's this story that has just as rich storytelling but in much smaller doses. So if they have to take the stops, then that's, it's perfect.
Small victories.
I loved it's so funny because we did a Tiffany D. Jackson episode not too long ago, and I
Beth.
picked The White Guy Who Dies First, and I read it and I loved it. And then you sent us your email about which ones you were picking, and I was like, oh, I'm changing mine now. I'm gonna read a different one. But yeah, I loved it just as much, I think, as
Oh, good. So I got into it. I love Tiffany. I'm obsessed
yeah,
with Tiffany Jackson, but also Terry J. Benton-Walker,
yes,
the blood debts and the blood
yes.
justice. Like, oh my, I finished Blood Justice and just sat there. I was in a coffee shop and just sat there like, again, we're not recording faces, but my mouth was just open and was like, oh my God. But yeah, his twists and turns and so good.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what else he does. That'll be cool.
Yeah, he's great.
All right, well, my first pick is kind of an anthology of sorts. It's the World of Lore series by Aaron Mahnke. This originated as a podcast called Lore,
Ah,
and they basically took some of their, more popular stories and broke them into three categories, which became three books. The first book is called Monstrous Creatures. The second one was called Wicked Mortals, and the third one was Dreadful Places. So these are all basically like adult nonfiction essay collections. He works with a team of researchers, and then he kind of reworks it into almost like a story. I do have these at my high school. I think it's definitely probably technically geared towards adults, but the high school kids can definitely handle these. I love the idea of his podcast of where you're getting these little snippets of true and spooky and weird events in history. This is the kind of thing that I just like live for. And I do kind of prefer the books over the podcast just because one, it's very much organized around themes a little bit more. With the podcast, it's kind of like we're doing this week, we're doing this week, and there's not really any rhyme or reason, but in the books there's like the collection, which I really like that factor. I think it depends on what you're probably most afraid of would be the spookiest one. Monstrous Creatures obviously is about, spooky creatures, like for instance, the Jersey Devil. That's one of my favorite ones to read about. Wicked Mortals is more about people being the scary thing. This featured like H.H. Holmes, for instance, and then Dreadful Places is about haunted places, spooky places, like the Stanley Hotel that inspired The Shining. I would love to write one of these books. I love reading about all these little tidbits, so this would be like my dream to do. I love these things. But because it's talking about history, there's a lot of references to violence, death, blood, gore, torture, and just general mistreatment of everybody throughout history. So just keep that in mind. Squares would be nonfiction, spooky, and fall vibes.
Love it.
that is such a good podcast.
Yes, yeah. And if you like the podcast, then I definitely recommend the books because like I said, I think it just works so much better when they're organized together.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a thing. I'm definitely gonna look that up. That's great.
Yes. And they have such pretty covers. Like they're very like spooky and fun for sure. All right, Amanda, tell us about number two.
Okay. Let me find it first. Okay, yes. My second one is It Came from the Trees by Allie Russell. This is a middle grade spooky book for fans of Bigfoot. So I felt like they took the idea of Bigfoot and brought it into for this generation, right? So Jenna loves the outdoors and convinces her best friend to join the Cottontails, which is a survival group for girls to go out into the wilderness, right? So think Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, things like that. But when Reese is taken from their tent in the middle of the night by an imposing figure that looks part man, part animal, no one believes Jenna. She actually sees it happen. She's telling everybody this is what happened. She got pulled out of her hands, and Jenna feels super guilty, right? Because she convinced her friend to go on this adventure, and then her friend gets taken. So since no one will listen to Jenna, and actually, they think, oh, she probably just ran away. Like they're giving all these excuses as to why, her friend Reese is gone, and so she decides to take matters into her own hands, and she joins the Owlets, which is another survival group, and she goes out with them back into the woods to see if she can help Reese find her way. So like she thinks that Reese was taken into the woods by this person, this figure, whatever, and she tries to like leave her breadcrumbs to see that she can help her get out. That's her way to try to help her friend. And that's only if her friend is able to get away from this creature. But now the monster has set its sights on Jenna. And so this was such a great middle grade scary book. I feel like they continue to step it up. With our 4 through 7 demographic of age groups. Because, the kid, like y'all said, is that the kids are always going in for goosebumps, right? They want to be scared, but not like terrified. These are mainly targeted towards like my 6th, sometimes 7th grade kids. That are looking to be scared. And this one definitely had great of those vibes. It's funny that Deb used a Adranna Cuevas book because it's because of Adranna Cuevas that I saw this book. She recommends middle grade books on Fridays on her Instagram. And so she had said this one was super spooky, great debut by this author, and has great representation. And so I read it and she was right. The content warnings would be body horror, gore, death of an animal, blood, death of a child, gaslighting, kidnapping, and racism. The bingo squares for our little time period right now would be a 2024 release and also fall under spooky.
Nice. I'm gonna add this one to my list for sure. I love like Bigfoot ones. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
there's no
cool.
crying. There's no crying in this one. This one was straight up just spooky for you, Rachel. So,
Well, when you said death of a child, I'm like, uh-oh. Like,
no.
Yeah.
It's like from a long time ago that they're referencing a missed kid.
Recounted.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, you're good.
All right, I'll try that one. All right, Deb, you're up with your second pick.
Oh, I'm still laughing. That was funny. Okay, so my second another zombie one. It is called Heart Still Beating, and I will put this out there that it was on my shelf for a while, and then it got nominated, I guess, for one of the reading committees I'm on, and there's somebody on our committee who does not like horror, sci-fi, horror, romance, anything. And I was like, why? What's the matter? Well, it has to do with zombies. I couldn't get to my shelf fast enough, so I grabbed it. And what it is this book takes place 3 years after the infection. So basically, the main question is, can you find love in the zombie apocalypse when one of you is human and one of you is not really a zombie any longer? So it's told from the point of view of 2 characters, Mara, who was turned into what they call a tick. That's what they call the zombies. She got infected, but there's a trial medication that allows her to regain control and like stops the degeneration, if that makes sense. She still has her mind and everything. And you find out that you have to get injected with this within like the first 2 days of the transition. Anyway, and then the other character is Rory, a girl who really had to mature quick when this whole zombie apocalypse happened in order to protect her family. However, we find out Rory and Mara were a couple before this all happened. And when they first meet up, what happens is after the change and lots of medication, because she's like Mara is holed up in like an army base where they keep all the ticks to see, is this really going to hold, or are they going to become, flesh-eating zombies again? Well, Mara makes it through the trial, and she has to get a shot every day. That's the key thing. She's sent to live with Rory and her family, and it turns out Rory's parents are her godparents. And so she doesn't want to go, but she goes because in order to keep her humanity, she has to get these daily injections. Meanwhile, Rory is repelled by the idea of what they now call the altered. So you go from being a tick to being an altered because you're getting this medication. When these altereds are joining the island where they're all living, it's kind of, I think it was like off the shore of California somewhere, or the Northwest. So what happens is Mara gets the island. All the islanders are divided, struggling to adjust to this new reality. And amidst this tension, Rory and Mara have to navigate their complex feelings for each other. Meanwhile, thrown into the mix is Mara's sister, Carter, who becomes this like robo soldier, I guess, and works for the bad guy on the island. So there's that conflict between the two sisters. What else did I have to write? It's been a while since I read this, but it was so good. Oh, between learning to live this new life, finding her first love, is not happy she's back, along with her sister, who is center of her world. She has a lot of obstacles could come over. And the story is told from both Rory and Mara's point of view. And you see what happens when you get that psychotic army leader. All he wants to do is kill all of the altered and the ticks. And he sets Mara up to take the fall of the death of someone close to him. And you see what ends up spiraling out of control. I don't want to get into it, but you see what happens when they each learn what happened before, when this whole outbreak happened 3 years ago, and they get split up and how they all come back together. So it was just, think of Walking Dead, The Last of Us, but throw in Warm Bodies. Because if you're familiar with Warm Bodies, that's what happens to them. They somehow come back to life again. But in this case, it's through the medication. So the content warning is definitely violence. You have stupid men. That's what I call it. It's because the guys that get power trip, blood and gore. There's a death of a child, just a lot of death, a lot of blood, a lot of violence. But then you have the nice LGBTQ aspect of it, the sapphic romance, and how they fight against everything to try to come back together. I really hope she does write another book about that, because I'd like to see what happens. It doesn't necessarily leave off on a cliffhanger, but there's some things there I was like, well, can I have some more? So.
When I first saw the cover, it looks fantasy to me. And so
I
wish that it looked a little more zombie, because then I would have been like, yes, I like zombie books too. In the After, I don't know if that's a zombie book, but that's like one of my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I guess once you start reading the book, you'll kind of understand the cover, but I would never have known it was a zombie romance until it got that nomination, or it would have just sat on my shelf, and then I would have just put it in the high school library. I don't know. So yeah, that was mine.
Sounds good. While you were describing it, I was thinking of Warm Bodies. So
yeah. Oh, the minute I started reading it, I went, this is Warm Bodies. And it's the female version, and I kind of liked it a little bit better. But
nice. All right, Rachel, tell us about your second pick.
So my second pick is a middle grade novel. It is It Found Us by Lindsay Currie. So I started middle school last year. I was not really big. I was not up on the middle grade books. And so I started reading everything that I could find that I thought the kids would be into. And I got this one as an audiobook, actually, from Libro FM. And I will just say that the audiobook version of this is especially horrifying, because the narrator uses this ghost voice, and I would listen. I have a mildly long drive to work. And so I would listen to the audio. So I'm tired, and it would have this ghost voice. And I was like, on earth. But anyway, the audiobook is great. So Hazel is 12. She likes to do what she calls sleuthing, but that everybody in the town calls snooping. It's very Harriet the Spy vibes. She overhears her brother and his friends talking about how they're going to go and play trick or treat at this cemetery because kids are dumb. And so she decides to go and follow them to, make sure that, nothing bad happens. And she wants to investigate. There's claims that the cemetery is haunted. So she's going to go and investigate. While they're playing the game, towards the end, they realize that her brother's best friend, Everett, is missing. There are no signs as to where he went, and nobody, remembers seeing anything or hearing anything from him. He's just gone. So Hazel and her brother go home, and then all of a sudden there's all of these spooky things that happen. She hears whispering, the aforementioned spooky voice on the audiobook. There's whispering. She smells smoke randomly everywhere. And then there's these just like cold spots. And so it seems that a ghost has followed them from the cemetery, that the ghost joined their epic game of hide and seek. And, do they find Everett? Who is the ghost? What happened? You have to read the book to find out. But it's so good. And again, it's very middle grade, so it's spooky enough. And the thing, I've read several of Lindsay Currie's books, and she always has, a little bit of like the historical aspect with her ghost stories. So I really liked that. The cover, so one of the bingo squares would be leaves on the cover, and the cover is super spooky. But it has these elephants that play into it, but you have to read it to find out how. Is it a ghost elephant? Who knows?
Oh, I love it.
It's not a ghost
Lindsay's
elephant.
amazing. I love her books. Like she nails middle grade spooky,
Good.
Mm.
And the newest one, so this It Found Us was published from last year, and then Mystery of Locked Rooms is her newest one, and it's an escape room. Oh my gosh, it was so good.
Right?
So good. Yeah, that was
I cannot wait for it because like it was like what is that, Limoncello's Library kind of thing, but more spooky than that. Yeah, it was. I love the escape room vibe because
it was so good.
Yeah, like I never know how
sequel to that one.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes, there will be a sequel for sure.
Yeah, I want to know more about the people that built that house.
Right? It was crazy.
Yeah, it definitely was. I like that they are producing like scary middle grade now, because I feel like it's really hard to find ones that are just that perfect level of scary for, like you said, like the 6th, 7th graders.
Right.
That's a tough spot.
Because that's what they want,
Yeah.
and it's hard. And, that's usually when they ask for it. I'm like, well, what do you consider scary? Because there's also those different levels.
Right.
So I like, because it's real creepy. Like like I don't want a ghost in my room making it cold. Maybe in the summer. I don't know, maybe.
There you go.
It gets real hot down here.
Well, speaking of real creepy, I'm going to get real creepy. My next book is called The Hunger by Alma Katsu. This is an adult reimagining of the infamous Donner Party and their fateful trip on the Oregon Trail. If you don't know, the Donner Party was a real group of about 87 American pioneers, men, women, and children that were headed west for a chance at a better life. But throughout a series of unfortunate events, they ended up snowbound in the Sierra Nevada. And only 48 of their party survived. So our author here takes this story and, in true, historical fiction format, fills in all those gaps and really creates a story. She weaves in some supernatural questions like, is there something out to get them? While also just making this horrific story even creepier somehow. And it was just amazing. I mean, I can feel like the creepy factor just escalating as we get closer. And I think this is a special case of a book where if you know what happens in the end, I think it makes the entire book creepier because you know the closer they get to those mountains, the worse it's about to get for them. You know what they're heading into. So their morals are kind of pitted against their growing suspicions, their hardships, and their serious desperation to stay alive. So fantastically creepy, great atmosphere, interesting take on this historical event that I can never get enough of. But you need to be aware that there's lots of dark vibes going on. We got death, violence, death of an animal, abuse, assault, gore, cannibalism, all of the stuff. This will work for thriller, spooky, and fall vibes. And I have to say, this book itself reminded me of this show I just finished last night called The Terror. It was on AMC several years ago, and it was kind of like a historical, possibly supernatural imagining of an actual set of two ships a long time ago in like the 1800s that were trying to find the Northwest Passage, and they got stuck in the ice, and it was their like journey to try to survive. They ended up there for like 2.5 years, just stuck, and then they had to try to walk back in, and ooh, very creepy vibes, just like this book. So I think they went really well together since I was recommending this book today.
I feel like everyone should know this is Rachel's second Donner Party book recommendation.
Yes, I think the first one was To Stay Alive by Silka Brown. I even have a little note to like reference it because that's like in a verse form and it's very creepy as well.
Yeah, it definitely gets me more interested in it. I mean, I've never really have been. I mean, I've heard of it, and then there's like the Nathan Hale graphic novel,
Donner Dinner Party. That's what I was just thinking.
right? And it's so popular in our middle schools, and so yeah, and now, but like every time Rachel talks about it, I'm like, I need to like bone up on this history because I don't know enough about it.
Oh yeah, like, this is so fascinating. I mean, it's creepy all by itself. If somebody just tells you what happened, it's scary enough.
Yeah, but that's another one with Deb's content warning of stupid men. So I'm like, just it's gonna be snowing. Like, don't go above, like, don't go over the mountains, you dummy.
Well, and really, what happened is they just started way too late. They didn't even leave until like April. They were I think they were the last party to leave.
Yeah, and then
start. And then they took the shortcut, and it didn't.
People were like, "No, don't do that." And they were like, "No, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it." There you go.
Yeah, didn't end well. For more than 48 of them. Yeah. All right, those are recommendations for the week. Special thanks to Rachel for guest hosting with us this week. Rachel, where can our listeners find you online?
I am on Instagram at Rachel Reads. That's RACHAEL, because we spell it right around these parts. Rachel Reads. And then on TikTok, it's at Rachel Reads _.
Awesome. And Deb, thanks for returning this week. Remind our listeners where they can find you online.
You can find me at all the platforms at Z_Brarian. That's me. Thanks for having me back. This was fun.
Perfect. This was a fun episode. I love this.
Good.
If you have any questions, suggestions, or comments, reach out on social media at Books and Bingos or email us at booksandbingos@gmail.com. Thanks for listening and join us again next week where we'll be recommending November releases. Happy reading.
Stay spooky.